So this is day 2 of using my brand new DJI Osmo Pocket 3 camera, and I'm taking you out on the streets of London with me for a nice little winter stroll while we walk and talk. And there's something so nice about bringing you along with me for a walk while I unload the contents of my brain. When we go for a stroll, that's often our time to reflect. You know, when we're not watching television or listening to music or working on something, I do my best thinking when I'm out for a walk, and I do spend a lot of time walking. That's how I get most of my exercise. And it's one of the great things about Europe, because unlike the US, Europe is a place where everybody walks. You get around on foot most of the time. It's a beautiful, cold, crisp day in London. About 3 degrees today. And yeah, it's been a very cold week. So I'm on my way to donate a coat to the homeless, because I was walking the other day and I saw on Piccadilly there's a set of coat hooks with a sign saying "Leave a coat for the homeless," and I thought that was such a nice idea, because we've all got things hanging around in our wardrobe that we don't wear. Because when we hit a cold spell like this, it's horrible to imagine people out in the street having to suffer through this, and if my coat can help somebody, then that's the least I can do. So yesterday I took a coat to leave on one of those hooks, and today I'm going back with another one. As I was saying, London is such a strollable city. It's one of the things I love about living in Europe, because most European cities are very much catered to pedestrians, unlike American cities, which are more geared towards drivers. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just a different way of living. I guess because our cities are so old, and people say that it's unsafe here. But I've been living in the UK for about 40 years in total, and nothing bad has ever happened to me on the streets of London. I think social media amplifies the worst of everything. So you're not going to see many posts about how safe a place is, but posts about how dangerous that place is always go viral. Okay, so we are in a beautiful part of Mayfair called Shepherd's Market, and look at this barber shop here, Jack the Clipper it's called. Isn't that cute? I love businesses that have a pun in their name, like Jack the Clipper. Especially ones with ethnic puns, like wok and roll, a Chinese takeaway. You have to pronounce it with a Cantonese accent. Wok and roll. I'm allowed to do that because I'm Cantonese. And there was a Thai restaurant I saw online called One More Thai. One More Thai. Can you think of any others? I've heard some pretty funny Indian ones, but I can't think of them off the top of my head. So let me know in the comments if you can think of any businesses with funny puns for their name. But isn't this charming? Yeah, as I was saying, people love fear-mongering about London and other European cities, saying that they've collapsed and it's so dangerous and you can't walk around without getting your phone stolen and getting knifed. But all of that is just sensationalism. Sure, there is a lot of knife crime in London, but it typically happens among the youth who are in gangs. It's part of the gang culture here that there is a lot of gang violence. But if you're not in a gang, it's very unlikely to affect you, because these attacks are part of the turf warfare that happens between these gangs, fighting over their territory. And if you're not in a gang, you're very unlikely to get caught up in it. And also because they're attacking one another with knives. Not to say that that's a good thing, but to be honest, it's much more targeted than running around with a gun, randomly shooting at strangers, because these are not generally attacks on strangers, but very targeted attacks. But of course, yes, you now and then hear on the news about some crazy psycho with a knife attacking strangers, but that can happen anywhere, and I don't think it happens in London any more than it happens anywhere else. Yeah, so a lot of the time when I mention that I'm in London, I get comments like, "Stay safe, I hope you're okay there," as if I'm living in some kind of war zone. But I used to live in Vancouver. I spent about I think it was about 12 years I lived in Vancouver, and it felt way more unsafe, if you call it that, because I don't ever feel unsafe. I'm a strong man, I can look after myself, but it felt a lot rougher there than it does here in London. Your chance of getting attacked by some crazy drugged up psychopath on the street is way higher than it is here in London. I mean, you don't really see that here in London. And you know, if those of you who live in Vancouver or perhaps anywhere on the West Coast will know what I'm talking about. You know, the downtown core of many formerly glorious cities along the West Coast. Well, they are still glorious cities, but these cities have a rough underbelly to them. And I remember what it was like in Vancouver, going to Chinatown. I loved Vancouver Chinatown. My favorite restaurant of all time was Gam Gok Yun, Daisy Garden, a noodle house on Pender Street in Chinatown. But walking there from my flat in Yale Town, I had to walk through the Night of the Living Dead. Seriously, it felt like a zombie movie. And that was back in the 90s. And I hear it's a lot worse now. So if you want to talk about safety, you're actually much more unsafe there. Especially, you know, as a woman, you know, a lot of people think that it's not safe for women here, which is totally untrue, because it's much more unsafe in a city like Vancouver or San Francisco or Los Angeles or Seattle or Portland. Okay, so I'm going to flip the camera around and talk about where we are now. And so we are now on Piccadilly, and in front of me on the other side of the road is Hyde Park, and to my right, or behind me now, is Hyde Park Corner. And if I spin right around, there's Hyde Park, and then in that direction Piccadilly will take you to Piccadilly Circus, Leicester Square, the centre of the West End. And the reason I'm showing you this is so you know where this coat drop-off is, because if you live in London and you've got any unwanted winter wear, I would suggest you take it there to help a homeless person. So I'm walking along Piccadilly towards Piccadilly Circus, away from Hyde Park Corner, and we're passing the Athenaeum Hotel, and then next up we've got the Sheraton Grand, and the drop-off point is just beyond that, on the next block. The drop-off point is actually just beyond the Japanese embassy, which you'll recognize by the Japanese flag hanging in front. And back to the issue of safety, I think it's safe to say that any major city is unsafe in terms of, and actually unsafe isn't even the correct word. In any major city, you are at a risk of being pickpocketed, having something stolen from you, because there are opportunists who are on the lookout for tourists who have their guard down, and it happens all the time. Anywhere in the world, people will steal your bag when you're not looking, or your wallet or your phone. Although admittedly it happens less in Asia. In East Asia, they have stealing is just much less part of their culture there, and you can leave your goods lying around and no one will take them. But that's out of the ordinary if you in the context of the world as a whole. Okay, so it's just along here on the left, and I can see that the coat that I left yesterday has been taken, so I hope it's found a good home. It's called the Wall of Kindness, and it says, take a coat if you're cold, leave a coat if you don't use it anymore. And there's 8 hooks here. I want to see them filled up. And there's my fleece-lined waterproof coat, which I hope will find a good home with somebody who needs it. Oh, cool. Yeah, yesterday when I left my coat here, there were 2 others hanging, and they're all gone, which is great. Amazing. The Wall of Kindness on Piccadilly. Another myth I hear a lot online about London is that it's racist. And you hear that a lot about Italy and Spain and other European countries. But from my experience, London is one of the most cosmopolitan, diverse, multicultural and tolerant places I've ever been. And I've lived in many countries. So I speak from genuine experience as opposed to hearing things online or visiting as a tourist. I've lived and gone to school all over the world. Way back in the 80s, when I was 10, 11, 12, we lived in Bedford, a small town which was about an hour's drive out of London, and I experienced daily racism there. It was really awful, and it was difficult for me as a child because I wasn't the person I am now. I didn't have the confidence and the self-esteem I have now. It was brutal because I had strangers yelling racial slurs at me on the street, children and grown-ups alike. Stuff like Ching Chong Chinaman and mock accents, and they would pull eyes at me, and sometimes they even said fuck off back to China for no reason. Someone would just yell across the street to me, fuck off back to China, and I was 10, 11, and it really hurt. But the reason I'm bringing this up is to say that that was in the past, and times were very different then. We were one of the only Chinese families in Bedford. So I stood out like a sore thumb, and I had the stereotypical Chinese rice bowl haircut at that age, so I looked a lot more Chinese than I do now. So I was a target for every racist walking down the street. But times have changed, and I've not experienced anything like that in the last 30 years. And today, you hear people online saying that London or Europe is the most racist place on earth because people shout ni hao to you or konnichiwa if you're East Asian. But that just means hello. They're greeting you. They're welcoming you to their country. That's not racism. I mean, sure, it could be done in a racist way if they're pulling eyes at you and laughing when they're doing it. But if they're not doing that, you cannot say that it's racism because you don't know what's in their mind. It was customary for a lot of people in Gen X to try, it still is for a lot of them, to try to say hello to you in what they think is your native language. And if they can't tell if you're Chinese or Japanese or Korean, that's not a crime. I can't tell either. My mom can't tell the difference between all the different white people on the planet. My mom thinks all white people look the same. So that's not a crime, and it's not racism. But the reason I'm bringing this up is to say that racism ended overnight when we moved to London. It's like my entire life transformed overnight, and for that reason I will always love London. I'm getting verklempt here talking about this. I've always felt welcome here. I've always felt at home. And sure, there are bad people here and there, but you get that everywhere. But what I do resent is those race baiters who go online just to talk shit about this place, especially the ones who've never even been here, or base their entire opinion on one thing they saw online, which doesn't represent this place at all. Anyway, I'm going to wrap up here, so I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please give it a like and leave me your comments if you've got anything to say about anything that I've said. And if you haven't already done so, please hit the subscribe button. Oh, and a final reminder, if you're in London and you've got any winter wear that you no longer need, drop it off at the wall of... what was it called again? Wall of love? Wall of... I can't remember, wall of something next to the Japanese embassy on Piccadilly.